For 6 years, the Ontario Liberals have been promising to balance the budget by 2017-18. This week, the province's financial accountability officer crunched the numbers and expressed some mild skepticism that the government will actually make good on its promise. Let's find out why. Here's Ontario's financial accountability officer, Stephen Leclair, and we're happy to welcome you for the first time
Thank you.
to our studio here. I want to start by just putting up these numbers that you released the other day.
Okay.
And we're sort of comparing and contrasting here. The bars on the left are your numbers. The ones right beside on the right are the government's numbers. And we can see through 2015-16, then 2016-17, your deficit sizes are a little bigger than theirs. And then, of course, for the year 2017-18, which is the year they promised a balance, and in fact are forecasting a bit of a surplus, you've still got a $600 million in the red. And then going forward after that, they're clearly showing still surpluses, while you have us going back into deficit 3 straight years. So we have a bit of a difference of opinion here, and I'd like to start by just understanding the assumptions that went into your calculations leading to these results.
Okay, when we go into these assumptions and that, we look at what is the expected growth rate for the economy, especially the nominal GDP and the elements of it. So one of the differences between us and the government in terms of growth factors for on the revenue side, we're still showing significant growth on the revenue side, but some of the major components that would improve the fiscal position, such as labor income, corporate income, we're showing a bit less growth than the government. We think that their estimates are a bit optimistic.
Well, you both think that the economy in the province of Ontario over the next few years is actually going to be, compared to the rest of the country, fairly buoyant, right?
Oh yes, we believe it's going to be significantly better than it has been over the past 4 years.
So why have you got us going into deficit for the next 4 years and they don't?
Well, so in 2017-18, which is the benchmark year that they've set for themselves, we indicate a $600 million deficit based upon some of that slower growth that we believe will take place. However, we do believe they will be in balance in 17-18. $600 million on a $130 billion budget is less than 0.5%. And so they will be able to balance in 17-18 according to what we know, because there's some play in the numbers always. These numbers are never exact. Into the out years, we think that some of the spending pressures will start to hit. So some of the assumptions that we use in building the charts is, what do we see in terms of program growth? And in program growth, we've adopted their numbers over the next few years. We don't have any additional information to question their numbers. That's one of the areas where I'm having some difficulty getting numbers. But they've had a good track record in meeting their spending growth, so we've adopted those spending growths. But their growth in spending in health and in education and a number of programs is significantly less than half of what are the general cost pressures that affect those things.
I think they would say, though, that when they took over, healthcare spending was growing at an annual rate of, what, 6.5%, something like that?
Yeah.
And they've cut the healthcare cost curve down to, what, 1 or 2% a year increases.
Yes.
So they've demonstrated an ability to reduce or slow the rate of growth of health spending. Not to your satisfaction, though?
No, it is to our satisfaction. We think that they've went further than they can actually maintain over a longer period of time. So yes, they're down to about 1.8%. Just general pressures, population growth, prices, say 3.6%. So no, they definitely needed to lower that spending growth rate, and they've done it, and we applaud them for that. What we don't know is where they're at, whether that's sustainable or not.
One of the things you and the government are having, I don't know if you want to call it a fight or you want to call it a disagreement, or I'll let you use the word you prefer. They're saying that when they discuss things in cabinet, that's secret, and they can't give you all of that information that you want. Is that a legitimate explanation for why they won't give you the info you want?
I respect the concept of cabinet confidentiality. I've sat around Treasury Board when I was with the Alberta government. I've heard the conversations that take place in cabinet, and yes, they do need to have cabinet confidentiality. My issue is the degree, the breadth of information that they claim cabinet confidence on. So we're having trouble getting spending estimates out beyond the current year. If they've built up a budget, we believe that those components that go into the budget should be revealed to the public. I don't want to know the deliberations that took place. I'm not allowed to, under the law, have those deliberations. But I do believe that we should know what they're building their budget based on.
Having said that, 2018 is an election year.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's just a coincidence that they plan to balance the budget in the same year as they're going back to the polls. Having said that, anything that takes place, any of the forecasts that are happening after the next Ontario election, in other words, after the year 2018, I mean, it's not really worth the paper it's printed on, is it?
No, I agree that after 2018 we may see changes, but that's why, and even beyond this year, next year I'm asking for information, and next year it may come out different. I don't expect the information to be exact, but I think it's a valuable information to the parliamentarians and to the public to know what their baseline is. And then if it does change, to express why it's changed. The other thing that we need to know that information for is so that we can actually do analysis on what the impact on Ontarians would be and on the economy in general.
Gotcha. They did get some good news recently, right, with the improvement in the credit rating. Did you take that into account?
The improvement in the credit rating by Moody's is their improvement said that they believe that they will balance and that they'll maintain the debt ratio. Moody's situation is exactly what we're saying it is, that we believe they will meet balance, and then the debt level will be sustained over a longer period.
I don't want to turn this into a sort of a he said, she said, but the reality is you have your understanding and expectations, and they have theirs. How do we know you're right and they're wrong?
How will we know is if that we can actually get access to some of this information so that we can analyze the information. We will put in our document, you can see there's a number of the assumptions that we use. You can go through our documents to question the assumptions. We will be putting the models up. We'll be showing our homework, and we'll be explaining why we think we're different than the government. And so then people can make their own decisions. Also, we have an economic forecast. We base it upon a set of forecasters. We're not out there believing that we know better than everybody else out there. We explain why we've picked certain numbers, so does the government in terms of their forecasts. And so it's more showing the work so people can understand where the numbers come to and then understanding where the differences are.
When you show your numbers to the Minister of Finance, the Finance Ministry officials, the Government of Ontario, do they say to you, okay, thank you for this information, and we're now going to change the following policies in order to reflect your concerns? Does that happen?
We do have discussions as we're preparing the documents going along in terms of what our numbers are, and I'm thankful to the public service at times, because they will say we'll have a discussion and we'll change our mind and stuff, because sometimes their number are already baked in, but going forward, I hope that our numbers has an impact on where they're going. I don't know whether they take them into account. I don't know exactly how they would adopt our information.
What kind of impact?
Well, first of all, there's one situation here. So in the numbers, if you go back to 2014, in the numbers shows cost of debt, the interest on debt. In 2015, what they presented in 2014 for the 17-18 year, in 2015, they dropped that number by $1 billion. And they dropped it by another $500 million in the next budget.
What's the explanation for that?
Well, the explanation they say in the budget is that they've been able to manage their interest rate on debt better, and they have taken advantage of long-term debt rates being quite low and everything. But that's what I'm saying is that we can highlight those numbers, and we hope that in highlighting those numbers, they will then start to maybe they did build a bit too much prudence into those numbers.
All right, clearly the biggest disagreement you guys have between you and the Liberal government is on what's going to happen in the out years after 2017-18, after the balance. I mean, you've got us, by the looks of things here, going another, $3 billion in debt? Accumulating $3 billion more in debt?
Yeah.
At a time when they're saying we're going to run a surplus of $1.2 billion. How can you guys be so offside from each other at that point?
Well, that's mainly related to the cost pressures, because we've now, beyond the year in which they put into balance and beyond the year 18-19, the numbers that they have, we've built into our numbers some additional cost pressures to reflect that they've had a number of years of spending restraint, and I applaud them for that, because they did need to bring down some of the growth rates, as you say, in health. But those pressures can build up, and you know, if they were to build up, we think that there's $4 billion worth of spending pressures. If they were to look just at cost pressures in 17-18, up to 17-18, there's $4 billion there. We think some of that is going to come home to roost, and that will have an effect on the budget. We're also showing, as most forecasters are as well, a slight deterioration in the economy in those out years.
Did you come to any conclusions? You know, there's a great difference of opinion between the opposition parties and the government as to whether or not the revenues that the government is realizing from the partial privatization of Hydro One will actually go into a special fund meant for infrastructure only, or whether it's going, in effect, to balance the books. Did you come to a conclusion about that?
Yes, we talked about it in our Hydro One report. We talked about it in our October report, I think, a bit, and we still believe it in this report, is that those revenues that they do receive, it goes into general revenues. There's no doubt about that. That's the way the books work. It goes into general revenues. We believe that because they presented a budget based upon a 10-year capital plan prior to the sale of Hydro One, those numbers on the expenditure side were already in the budget before they actually did the sale too, because the sale wasn't in the budget, but the numbers for the expenditure were. So once you add the numbers for the sale, that improves their balance.
So the opposition is more right than the government in its characterization of this?
I believe so.
You believe so? Okay. That was an unusually political statement you just made. Usually I can't get you people to acknowledge those kinds of things. So, okay, well done. If I remember this right, and I may not, is it part of your mandate as we get closer to the next election to crunch the promises that each party presents to the people of Ontario in advance of the next election and say who's on solider ground?
No, it's not.
Too bad. Can you do that?
There are ways that you can do it, but because I can do stuff under my own initiative, or else I can do stuff at the request of members and that. So you never know if a member may request me to look at certain programs going forward, because my budgets, because my legislation's a bit gray in this, because it says I can undertake to look at bills that are in front of the legislature or proposals. So I don't know what a proposal is yet, so we'll see.
But it's not beyond the realm of possibility that a New Democrat member, for example, might say, I don't believe anything these Liberals are putting out for the next election. Mr. Financial Accountability Officer, could you please crunch their numbers? And then you would do so.
Well, first of all, too, prior to an election, they have to release some numbers, and under the Fiscal Transparency and Accountability Act, the Auditor General is required to look at that.
So you may be off the hook.
No, we're going to continue to put out our reports, and the Auditor General and I have had some conversations about this, and while it's her mandate to do this, we'll be talking about it.
Okay. Mr. Leclair, in our last 30 seconds here, they've made the promise to balance the books by 2017-18. How important do you think it is to the finances of the province of Ontario that they, in fact, do that?
As I said, $600 million really doesn't matter. I think it's important that the deficit be in sight, whether they achieve it or not. I don't think it's really all that important.
Sorry, I want to make sure I understand. You say it's important that the deficit be in sight, or that the balance
is in sight. So, for example, because right now their debt requirement, that's one of the things that's elevated. And so, but the debt requirement reflects $45 billion in capital spending and only not close to $9 billion in accumulated deficits. It's clearly the capital plan that is crunching their debt numbers. So they need, crunching their debt numbers, so they need at least to see a balance in sight to actually, I think, to maintain their debt levels.
Understood. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
That's Stephen Leclair, the Financial Accountability Officer for the province of Ontario.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.